in your bibliography, you list quite a few books on the subject, such as Colonel Applegate's book, among others. Um, but what was that pipeline sort of like, and how did it develop?
Yeah, so you know, my approach is fictitious, but it's almost certainly what was taking place to some degree or another at the time, because British intelligence was in the. So let me step back. Um, in World War II, the OSS, the American OSS, and the British or slash Commonwealth Special Operations Executive, the SOE, were training in Canada, and then later in the United States, but particularly in the UK, out mostly in like these stately mansions, these fine old homes that were owned by various people, where they had large estates, where they were away from the cities, and they could bring in a bunch of students that were typically international in nature, and they were training them for uh, covert operations on the continent and elsewhere. And the the British were gearing up for World War II, and there was a lot of espionage, British espionage activity immediately after World War One, until the war started in Europe. And the the basic concept is they would typically take people who were uh, upper, from the upper class, who had, who could either be, diplomats, or, businessmen, who would then be basically gathering intelligence through the cover of being a businessman, right? Which is totally normal, and the way things work. So they would be these established people that would then be trained in, certain intelligence gathering type concepts. And then the SOE brought in some gentlemen from the Shanghai Municipal Police, which was a British law enforcement organization in Shanghai, China, specifically Misters Sykes and Fairbairn, who developed the pistol shooting, empty hand, knife, improvised weapons, match it, like all the like killing people stuff, uh, that they were training these guys in for, for this element. There was like explosives and other things later, and more conventional weapon training as well. But the training paradigm was from the SMP. Well, gentlemen who had been in the SMP were traveling around in America. Like there's correspondence between, um, John Fitzgerald and, Colonel Fairbairn. And Fairbairn had and would issue for undercover guys uh, Colt News Service revolvers, and others that were fixed, that they were fixing at the Shanghai Municipal Police Armory. And he talks about it in Shooting to Live and stuff like that, which is his kind of manual from the. I think I want to say it was pretty fully fleshed out by the late 20s. This training paradigm, and they were training in North America and in Canada and in the UK by then. So it's a very small jump to say, well, the Shanghai Municipal Police, which was, part of the British government, and there was an overseas intelligence element involved in them, like would and were training with this stuff, and then trained in World War II this way. They were almost certainly conducting this training in England, you know, in the mid 30s. Like it's almost 100% guaranteed that they were having this program at some level or another, because we do have documentation that shows that these guys were there doing work for the British government. And so, part of that is the British are gearing up for war with Germany again, even though like Americans, on the ground and the Brits on the ground don't want anything to do with another war in Europe. The powers that be do. So I think the training is really interesting and robust and really basic, and it's great for what it is, which is just this lowest common denominator, like high percentile, 90-10 rule kind of approach to, you have a couple days to train someone to fight with a handgun, and so you're going to do it as basically as possible. So he gets run through these schools, and they're training in these shoot houses that are just freshly built. And the idea is that this would later be one of these SOE training facilities, but they were like literally just building it out. And so Joe Shea is like the only student there, cranking through this intensive program, and then he ends up in London, staying in a house that's like run by basically the SOE precursor, or MI5, MI6, God knows who, uh, doing training, and there's other people there, and so he's doing espionage training in London, learning like running tails and you know language stuff, and some kind of finishing school for intelligence elements. He also learns like lock picking and how to break into houses from an old thief, because this is an old thing that guys do time and they want to go straight. And so what do? If you're really good at crime, you teach the government and private businesses. You're a security consultant, right? And so a security consultant is teaching like housebreaking and lock picking, and how would you climb in through a window on this house without like breaking tiles and giving yourself away and things like that. So he's learning this stuff. And then one of his guys, the SMP officer, Mr. White, who's like the weapons and empty hand guy and knife stuff, etc., is basically like, well, you're going into a situation that you need to have some military concepts. So he does what I present is something that an SMP guy who was a veteran of World War One would be aware of, which is like Japanese trench warfare techniques and night fighting techniques. There's this book called Night Movements that was a Japanese military manual that was translated by the U.S. military into English, and so it's a fusion of a bunch of these kind of real basic, like World War One, trench operations, and like you come into this position, and you have to dig in. So like here's the process that you would follow to develop your trench. First it's a little dugout with a berm in front of you, and then you have you dig down until you have a place that you can lie prone, comfortably, and then you're a proper single man position, and then how do you extend it out and things like that. The idea just like training him into this so that he's aware of it, because not only is it useful as like a form of training to kind of just make sure that someone's like down with this and they're internalizing it, but also so that they can recognize like the professionalism of the army that they're looking at, because he's not a military man. Like he wouldn't have had this kind of knowledge without being trained like in the fashion that a military man would.